Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Sunset Connection. I'm your host, Jessica Ho, bringing you the latest stories and insights from our vibrant neighborhood. As our podcast evolves, I'm excited to introduce two new segments to help serve our listeners better. Since I've recently transitioned into the real estate industry, the first segment, the Realty Rundown, will briefly discuss the latest real estate trends and developments in the Sunset District and the west side of San Francisco. Then we'll move into our featured guest interview segment and wrap things up with some community announcements. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Margaret Graf, a longtime Sunset resident, dedicated senior advocate, and accomplished author. Welcome to the first edition of the Realty Rundown. We'll start with some interest rates and finance, and then we'll move into more of a personal understanding of what it means to live in the Sunset District. Currently, interest rates for 30-year fixed mortgage remain around 6 to 7%. There was talk that there might be a cut in interest rates, but unfortunately yesterday Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve, decided not to cut. And it doesn't seem like interest rates are going to come down anytime soon. So that's bad news for first-time homebuyers who rely on loans. Sunset District's real estate market, though, continues to be very robust, especially for single-family homes, which are closing at about 30% above listing prices. Unfortunately, condos and multifamily housing, as well as commercial real estate, are seeing a slower recovery, but they present new opportunities for buyers waiting for prices to adjust. My broker at Park North Real Estate recently listed a home in Mount Davidson Manor by Ocean Avenue, and it listed for $1.275 million, but he got over 17 offers and it went for over $1.8 million, which is crazy. But that's kind of what the single family home market was, and that just closed like last month. So, I think that the Sunset District housing market has been very desirable, which has never been the case prior.
Yeah. Okay, if I give input?
Absolutely.
They're on the Great Highway, which is where I live, about second house up from Vicente. I don't believe it was listed on market. It was off market, 1.9. And I do not believe anything had been done to that house in many years.
Yeah.
It looked like it.
Right.
And that was early November, if I recall correctly. I think that was the most recent one that sold on my block. I live in the 2500 block, which I've been told by realtors is a sweet spot. For one thing, there's no overhead power lines.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And another one, those homes are set back a little further so that your driveways are a little deeper. And what it used to be in terms of the weather was cold and foggy. But climate change is here.
Yes, it is.
And that's no longer the rule. And the days are getting sunnier. It's like that the outer sunset has been discovered and the great secret is out.
Yeah. I think that lifted with the fog.
Yeah. It did.
One more thing before we wrap up the first edition of Realty Rundown is San Francisco offers a down payment assistance loan program, also known as DALP. And if you are a first-time home buyer, you might be eligible to get a loan up to $500,000 for a down payment. You have to apply before June 2nd, though, so make sure that you take advantage of this opportunity. So if you're considering selling or buying, now might be an excellent time still. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to connect you to the appropriate real estate agent or expert to help you out, whether with loans or with interest rates. So I think it's important that, you have a conversation with a trusted resource first to see whether or not you even are in a position to buy and how you can really leverage your resources to think about buying in the future. So it's never too early to start planning. All right. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's special guest, Margaret Graf. Margaret is a true Sunset treasure, a retired nurse and attorney, passionate advocate for seniors, and founder of the advocacy group Senior Power. She represents District 4 on San Francisco's Advisory Council on Aging and Disability. Margaret is also the author of The Adventures of Rob Raven, Climate Change by Wing and Tail, a charming and insightful story about environmental awareness through the eyes of a raven. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Margaret, you've called the Sunset District home for over 6 decades. What initially drew you here, and what's kept you here all these years?
Well, You have to go back to the 60s and understand the climate in the nation at that point in time. At that point, we were living in Minneapolis. It's very cold in Minneapolis in the wintertime, and there's a lot of snow. And my husband and I just one day looked at one another and said, "Why are we here?" We could not think of a good reason. So California beckoned. This is when all the songs, all the mood, everybody wanted to go to California. It was like, the sunshine gold rush, if you will. This was the 60s, and it was very popular. It was the summer of love. It was all of those things, and it set itself up as a mecca. You came thinking there would be opportunities and choices and freedom.
Were you here for the Summer of Love? I think that was
Oh,
1958.
yes. Oh, yeah, of course. I was in the 60s. I was here at the beginning.
That's amazing. Can you tell me what the mood was like?
Something in the air. And it was singing, and it was coming together, to use the phrase.
Did you live in the Sunset at that time?
Yes, always lived in the same house in the Sunset since I got here.
When you got here in the 60s, what did your friends think of the Sunset? Did you ever hear like, oh, I don't want to go all the way to the Sunset District. You live too far out in the boonies or anything like that?
No, we all went to the Haight.
Oh, okay. So you guys went to the Haight. Got it. Okay. So yeah. So that was where the central kind of location was for all the activity?
Yes.
Got it.
And yes, people would go to the beach. But if you wanted to go out, if you were in the party mood, you went to the Haight.
Do you remember where those spots were?
Oh gosh, no. That was a long time ago.
The Haight has changed a lot as well.
And I'm sure none of them are there.
And what kept you here all these years?
I had a family. The Sunset was a good place to raise a family.
Even back then?
Well, especially back then.
Especially back then.
Especially back then, because as I said, there were a lot of kids in the neighborhood. Back then, kids wanted to go to their friends, and I would just say to them, okay, well, 5 o'clock, you're back in the door. And then never worry. When my children started school, I would initially walk them till I was sure they knew the way home, and then I wouldn't.
Do you think it's because it was safer back then?
I think we were a little more blind back then. We weren't so much aware of the potential dangers. Do I think the dangers have increased? Definitely. But I think we also were a little naive. I would admit that for myself anyhow.
Do you think that was just sort of the culture back then?
Yes, because everybody did it.
Right.
If you accept that as the culture base, but everybody had everybody else's home phone number. I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom for 13 years. So there was a parent in residence. It wasn't like open city and the kids running wild. And we just took turns.
And now you have to hire nannies or
pay $25 an hour.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you've seen San Francisco change since the 60s. What's changed between then and now?
We don't trust one another anymore. We're more suspicious. I'm not saying that there isn't reason for it, but we're quicker on the trigger to react to what we consider a slight. Maybe somebody looks at you funny. It triggers a more violent reaction. I think we were more relaxed back in the 60s and certainly even into the 70s. I think there's an aura of anxiety.
When did you see that kind of switch from like a more relaxed environment, more trusting environment to more anxious and more suspicious?
I may not have the right years right, but I think it's somewhat recent, and I think it particularly when we hit the 2020s, it's gotten much worse. Back when I actually started Senior Power, my nonprofit organization in 2018, I started it because I was frustrated that there was a lack of resources for seniors. It was like they were isolated in their houses and were afraid to go out.
That was even before the pandemic, and it's gotten a
even
lot
before
worse
the
now,
pandemic.
right?
Right. But they were, I would have people tell me that they had not left their house in 10 years because they'd lost their confidence in themselves to go out. And when they did go out, there was nothing to go out to. And that was one of the primary motivators for starting Senior Power, is to give seniors a place to go to meet, to socialize, and to learn resources. Isolation is one of the most dangerous things that happens to seniors.
Absolutely.
There's,
Anyone.
Yeah, there is a lot of families in the Sunset that are 3-generational families, and the seniors play a very active role, which is fantastic. It's a cultural thing in some cases, and in some cases it is not. But the number of seniors living alone in the Sunset is a very high number.
Thank you for sharing what inspired you to start Senior Power. How do we reach those people? Like, what are your efforts in trying to be able to, because they're isolated. So how do you?
Well, it's a slow, painful learning process is what it is. With Senior Power, I started monthly meetings. When I held my very first Senior Power meeting, which I'm pleased to say you were my guest speaker, it was an idea, and I did not know if I would be sitting there with you and maybe 3 of my best friends, and that would be it. But when I put the word out, we had over 30 people.
That's right.
attend. And I thought, there's a need here.
There is a need.
I've
Absolutely.
got something. And we went along very happily with our monthly meetings until COVID hit.
Right.
And then we couldn't meet. And seniors, you couldn't have gotten them out of their house if you had dragged them, because they were afraid.
And rightly so.
And so I thought, how do I keep the cohesiveness of my group and still give them resources in a way to keep together? So I started a newsletter, and we simply sent it out on the internet. And seniors did not have access to the internet.
Right.
So that meant we had to have programs to teach them. Now, they can do quite a bit with their phone, even if they do not have actual computers sitting in their house. But seniors are not stupid. They caught on and they thought, oh, this is another world. This is how I can stay in touch. And they actually wanted to come to programs to learn how to use the internet. And once they had that, it was easy to put together programs to teach them things.
Right.
And to provide their resources. After we had cured COVID and people could start to get out again, then people were desperate to leave their house.
Right.
They wanted to get out. But they didn't want to go sit in another room, just in another building. So I bought a tent.
Oh.
And we erected this big tent once a month, and we held outdoor meetings. And we had sing-alongs, and seniors brought their musical instruments, and they brought their hobbies and activities that they'd learned to do. And that went along fine until it started to rain. And then, of course, that wasn't such a brilliant idea anymore. It evolved and it changed as it needed to, depending upon what the time and the climate was then.
Where are we now in 2025? What's going on with Senior Power?
I still do a newsletter 3 times a month. I have a very small number of people who still are seniors, obviously, and do not have internet and have no interest nor want to be involved with internet. And for them, I do a direct mailing. But the far majority now has welcomed the internet.
Can people reach out to you by email if they want to be added to the newsletter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'll link your email to the show notes.
Okay.
Great.
I have a partner that I work with, which is Community Living Campaign, which is a nonprofit here in San Francisco. And they have a lot of programs for seniors, which are all free. And we have walking groups now in the Sunset here. We have exercise programs here in the Sunset. Judy Hubble does a Tai Chi and Ocean Beach Park. There's things that have popped up based upon the evolving of our needs. And a lot of them are strictly senior oriented. Not all, but they are that way.
As a representative of the Advisory Council on Aging and Disability, what are the key issues facing seniors today?
Housing. That's always the top of the list, is housing. It is very, I don't think there's a sadder sight than to see a homeless senior. In the Sunset area, that is probably less of an issue. I don't mean it doesn't exist. I do not mean to say that at all. But I think it is probably less of an issue than it is in the hot spots in San Francisco. We call it DAS for short, and that's the Department of Aging and Disability Services. They have a phone number, which is a hub, if you will. And if you are to call into that number, they can put you in touch with any and all of their services, depending upon what your particular need is. Back in the day, this was probably about 2017, when I was beginning to wake up to the fact that DAS's programs are vast and wide, but it was a disconnect between downtown and what the services were there and what we were able to know, utilize, or even be aware of on the western side. And one of my goals was to get rid of that disconnect. Thank God for self-help for the elderly. For years, we had only one senior center, and it was on 40th and Vicente. My kids went to preschool there. Self-help for the elderly now runs it. And at the moment, it is closed because they're renovating it, which my personal thought, it's the first time they've done so since my kids went to preschool there. But they are renovating it. It's one in our entire huge center with a huge population of seniors. Self-help also has now purchased 1234 Great Highway, which was the old motel that was there on the lower Great Highway in Lincoln Boulevard. And they are in the process of getting permits. They're doing public meetings to get the public involved about it. But they're going to build, at least as of the last meeting, a 7-story home for seniors. And they are going to also have a new senior center there.
That's great.
It's all great. It's not enough, but it is progress. These things take a long time. It's the San Francisco permitting. It's the getting the neighborhood's acceptance. It's the building. It's expensive, but this is badly needed housing. And I had the experience of having a very, very good friend, and we had so many talks about how sad she was about having to leave San Francisco and live down the peninsula.
That's rough.
It's very, very sad.
So you recently published a book called The Adventures of Rob Raven. What inspired this book? What's it about? And what do you hope readers will gain from it?
What inspired the book was climate change. In my heart, I'm an environmentalist. If you have to learn climate change and about it when you're my age or even your age, it's too late. I think climate change needs to be taught to small children. I wrote the book as a book to be shared between a parent or a grandparent and a child, where a raven has to leave his home in a metropolitan area because it's become so polluted and he can't find materials for his nest and whatever, and he has to go and find a new home. This resonates for seniors because so many of them are like the friend I just described to you that had to, at her comfortable old age, leave her security of her friends and her home and relocate someplace else that was totally different. This is very hard. But I chose a common raven because, first of all, it's about the smartest bird. They do relate to humans, and I needed him to be very imaginative to tell the story. But as we go through each of the 12 chapters, each one ends with a common activity for the grandparent and the child to do together. Like, for instance, after chapter 1, it's how to make homemade suet cakes for birds. But each chapter is followed by like how to read a tide table or warnings when you go to the beach and what should you take with you. It's an interactive book, as I said. I wrote it because children relate to animals and birds. And because it was just a way to tell the story of what it means to be an old bird, if you will, and how we can adapt.
It's a great story, and I actually bought one of your books, and I'm sending it to my brother-in-law so that he can read it to his children,
Yep.
who are, I think, 1 and 3. So we'll see if they can grasp the concept. But I love the book, too, because it tells the story of Ocean Beach.
Yes.
And the animals are all native to Ocean Beach, which is great. So I think it's just also like a beautiful sunset story.
It is. Well, they say write what you know. The beach is it's my front yard. It's across the street from me. So I did not have to go far for the pictures or the story about the animals. I live amongst ravens. Those are all my little neighbors, and they're all in the book.
Thank you for sharing about the book that you published. And I hear that you're actually in the process of publishing another book.
Yes. Well, if I'm very lucky, I will have it in hand the middle of May. This is my second book. This is not for children. This is a story about the art of aging. I feel qualified to talk about aging because I have certainly aged. I'm 86 years old. I have a lot of experience aging. And so I think we need to take the fear of aging away. People are afraid of getting old, and I think we need to show them it's just a cycle. That's all it is. It's just a cycle, and you pass for many of them through your life. You went from infant to a small child. You went from small child to teenager to college. All of those are simply cycles. Aging is just exactly that. The title of the new book is Senior Sharp because we are. Never underestimate us. We are still sharp. It consists of 45 essays, all written by me on aging and life, and 45 art pieces that were all by seniors who were in a senior living facility, and all of whom partook in another nonprofit in San Francisco's program, Art with Elders. And they go into all of these assisted living facilities and they teach them art. And some of the artists, I think, have never held a paintbrush in their life. And some of them studied art in Paris. You know, there's a broad range, but they're all expressing themselves. And I have picked and chosen an art piece to match each of my 45 essays.
It's beautiful.
So you see the visual, beautiful art piece, and then you read my essay. At least that's my plan. And you get a feeling for how seniors live, how aging is, and why it's an art. I believe it was Betty Davis who said that aging is not for sissies.
I mean, she's not wrong.
No.
And it's something that no one can really escape,
No.
right? No matter how hard you try.
Let me put it this way. You do not want to escape it because the only escape is not a good choice. If you don't get to age, you are not here anymore. That's it. So you want to age. It's how you do it. That's up to you. And the point is to take away the fear and to just say, okay, sad I had to give up my career. Sad that this is no longer there. The kids have left home, whatever. There's new experiences. As I said, some of the people that produced the artwork that is in my book, I really think had never held a paintbrush before in their lives. And they were totally startled to learn they could. Art that is an expression of you. Show us what you are. Show us your inner self. Show us how you would wish to express yourself. That's a gift.
All right. So before we close, I just want to make I want to make one community announcement as a follow-up from my episode with Captain Brian Hu. there's been some feedback about, scams not only impacting seniors, but everyone, especially with the advent of technology. And in fact, Vindy Chan, as part of she's our safety liaison for the Terraville Police Station, reached out and really wanted to invite all of our listeners to join us in like a scam awareness project that she's working on, where we meet every other month, and we just met in March, and so we'll be meeting in May again. So if you're interested in joining that or learning more about how you can get involved stopping scams, please reach out. Margaret, are there any other community resources or events you'd like to highlight?
Yes. On May 15th, in the Hall of Flowers from 1 to 4 p.m., Community Living Campaign is going to be having what they call Never Better Elders. It's a senior resource program. There'll be entertainment. I may be reading one of my books. I will be there along with Art with Elders, which is the art program that I spoke of earlier. We'll be manning a table. I will have my, hopefully, 2 books there. There'll be entertainment, there'll be food, there'll be resources, there'll be a lot of takeaways that you can
freebies.
Use. So, yes, I wanted to highlight that.
Great. And we'll also make sure to link that to the show notes as well. Margaret, thank you for sharing your time, wisdom, and passion with us today. It's been so delightful hearing your perspective. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Sunset Connection. Let's continue supporting each other and staying informed. Until next time, that's all, folks.